Well, thank you so much, Jen, for that awesome introduction. And so awesome, as you said, to see so many great people from all over the world here. It's been a little bit since Amanda and I've done one of these together. So excited to be back here with her. A little bit more about us. Catalyst Creative, we are an agency that started almost 10 years ago. My background was working in events in New York City, mostly for JP Morgan and American Express, like really large, sort of corporate events. Amanda was more working in hospitality, but we were best friends. We went to every event. We said, the opening of an envelope in New York City in our 20s, we were going to be there. But we've sort of done it all. And we started Catalyst with our partner, Tony Shea, who started Zappos.com, really brought us on to sort of create this company to start building community. And really, when you look at events and some of the questions and some of the things that Jen and the Be Social team had put forward before this event, really all were about community. So you'll probably hear us talking a lot about that. Community, when we first started out, we called ourselves a community design firm, and the SEO kept sending proposals to us to build neighborhoods. So we quickly sort of changed to really sort of be an agency around branding, marketing, and events. And really now we're solely sort of focused on events. And then we're also working on, a couple of other really exciting things that we want to keep you guys abreast of. But yeah, super excited to be here. And Amanda, I don't know if you want to give any other introductory tips or anything else that I left off.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Hi, everyone. I love how engaged everyone is, just being able to share things about themselves, or, I love the name Logan because that's my child's name, and I see Amanda in the chat, and I love that name too because it's my name. But it's really, really great to just see everyone, especially with all of the Zoom fatigue and all the digital experiences, just show up fully. So thank you so much. So as Robert mentioned, we started Catalyst really with this intention to change the way that people experience experiences, because we experienced quite a lot of them, and we found ourselves kind of going and leaving exactly the same way. And we thought that we could do more intentional experiences that could shift people's perception and perspective of reality in some way for the better. And my background, I have a background, and it's kind of a weird background. I have a master's in education and curriculum instruction, and then, which we're going to be talking a bit about, so I don't need to go too deep into it, but I wrote my thesis on engagement and what it actually meant to be engaged. And then I applied that framework in hospitality, as Robert mentioned. And I realized that, whether it's trying to sell math to a 6-year-old or trying to sell an open bar package to a drunk banker, it's always about garnering attention, earning trust, forging connection, and continuing to build that relationship wherever they are within these 7 levels of engagement. Applied that to hospitality. And then when Robert and I came together with Tony, it was using all of this understanding of what it meant to keep the attention of the individuals that we care about, our customers, maintain that relationship, and use experience to keep these individuals at high levels of connection and engagement. So yeah, that's me. Super excited to be here, and we're so excited to jump in.
Awesome. Great. And in the end, we're going to give you, Amanda didn't share as well, but she's also a best-selling author on Amazon. We have a book called The Seventh Level, which really is a framework that we have created, that we've applied for years to all of our events and sort of everything that we do. That's really an engagement framework that any of you who are planning events or who are working on marketing plans or whatever it is that it may be within your organizations. I saw here that there's a lot of people that are coming from schools. We've talked to a lot of people in higher education about how to apply this framework as well. And even it's being taught as a class at Howard University. And so really excited to have so many people in the educational world here, but we'll definitely be sharing at the very end a way that we're going to give away 10 of Amanda's books. So we'll share a little bit more about that at the end. But, I think the first thing that we wanted to talk about was, really talking about how we define success for in-person and digital events. And, I think before we can even talk about events and like what is successful and everything, is to sort of really look at like where we've been for the last 16 to 18 months. And, I believe in transparency and just being totally candid. For Catalyst Creative, about 65 to 70% of our revenue came from live in-person events. So obviously for us, the last 16 months has been unbelievably difficult for a lot of reasons, but, especially for that we planned, events for the Raiders and Google and Sonos and all types of brands, nonprofits for like Nature Conservancy for many, many, many years. And then sort of, last March, that all came to a halt. And so what we did then was really sort of looked at ourselves and sort of said, what events need to continue to happen and how we can make those digital. And then, the other side is that we were really just sort of honest with our clients and said, we really think that you should pause, focus on your teams internally, focus on, more connections like one-on-one, smaller group, chats, smaller group webinars, picking up the phone and actually calling the people within your organization, sending them personal emails, but not trying to sort of make this whole digital event thing to replace live in-person events. So we're really looking forward to, this summer and this fall as those events, depending on where you are in the country and where you are in the world, for those to start coming back. But I think, when we do look at these events coming back, I think that we've all probably been that person who was on a conference call where, there was 9 people on the call and you were maybe off because you had an appointment or something and you were trying to listen in and talk over people and it never really worked. We're really seeing that like with technology that there is now such a tolerance for people to be doing live events with a technical component to allow people to be there virtually. So I think that's the first thing, is really sort of looking at your events and seeing how can we do that as a hybrid? How can we introduce Zoom? How can we record this? How can we trim that down later to be a version that can be shared more widely, which, for us is great. But I also think that there are times that like smaller is better. And that was one of the things that we really learned with Catalyst, is that sometimes you don't have to make this huge splash. We talk about campfires and fireworks. And so one of our things that we talk a lot about is like, if you're really trying to get a small group of people, or within a larger group, if you can make it into some smaller groups, to do these sort of campfire type experiences. Maybe it's a smaller dinner party where you're hosting and like actually able to connect and really have conversations with people, versus trying to do, a larger event where people leave unengaged. They're confused by the message. They're not really sure why they're there. And so for us, that's something that, as things are coming back, don't be scared that like you may not be able to do these 100 or 200 person events, but people may feel more comfortable in these much smaller events. But to define success with those, we really look at, we talk about engagement. How engaged are people? Can you see people's facial expressions? Are people interacting in the chat? Do people, want to buy a ticket to next year's event at a discounted rate at that particular event? Are you sending out a survey? How many people want to give you that feedback? What did the attendance rate look like? If you're charging for the event, what was your CAC, your customer acquisition cost to get those people to come? And then also in your email communication, there's so much ahead of time. Like, are people really able to understand what they're being invited to and what the expectations are going to be for that? So really trying to like dial into some of those things to look to make your event successful, or some of the benchmarks that we look at. And I know Amanda will have some to add to this as well.
Yeah, I think that, okay, I can talk a lot about engagement, but beforehand, I do want to talk about the experience of what we have all dealt with over the past 16 to 18 months, as Robert mentioned, not only as businesses, but as humans. I think that we have faced more uncertainty than ever before. We're always facing uncertainty, but the amount of uncertainty we faced collectively has just been, in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, unsurmountable. And I think that it's an opportunity to be able to show up for people in ways that they didn't necessarily need for us to show up for them before. So when we're thinking about experiences and we're thinking about, what does it mean to bring people back together, we do have to think of things completely differently than when we did. It's not necessarily just a new normal, right? It's a completely new frontier based on the way that people have been feeling and what they've experienced without us really even knowing over the past year and a half. So everyone gets it, we all know. So I would love to kind of dive into this framework a bit and just kind of talk about how it pertains, how engagement is related to experiences. So the 7th level framework, there's 7 levels. The 7th level is defined as literate thinking. It's when your personal values and beliefs align with a message. So if you want to use the chat, if everyone wants to close their eyes collectively just for 30 seconds and think about an experience. My eyes are closed too, if your eyes are open. And think about an experience that, whether it's a brand or a message or a job, whether it was your first trip to Disneyland, or maybe it was a type of sneakers that you bought that made you feel really strong and athletic, or it was a new computer that made you feel professional and successful. An experience with a brand or a job that made you feel like it was a part of you. And you could open your eyes. I like to close your eyes when, I don't know if anyone closed their eyes, but again, I did. I like to kind of think through, take away one of the senses as it's not necessarily this part of our brain that we're always thinking with. It's a bit deeper. And if you want to put in the chat, what is a brand or a company that has directly impacted your identity, that's become a part of you in some way? And it could be something, again, as when you were a little kid, or it can be last year, or it could be the current job you're at. But that experience, when you really, and I don't see anyone sharing, so I don't know if anyone has ever had an experience like this, or if it's just a very daunting, there we go, thank you. It's a very daunting question, but this experience of feeling really deeply connected to a company is the seventh level. And that's what we're always striving for with our customers. We're always striving to create experiences. Thank you for sharing. Yes, awesome. Cotopaxi, Zara, UPW, Disney, Oxfam, great. And there's probably a story behind all of these on why this matters to you. Design Within Reach, how this became a part of you. Charity Water, awesome. I'm not going to read all of them, but I want to. But this is so great to see this interaction. And I think that my first job as a teen, where I met my husband, Target, love that. So we're striving for these relationships with our customers. We're striving for the seventh level with our customers. But so often we don't even know that even exists, because most people don't know that there are 7 levels of engagement. Most people think that engagement is binary, that it's disengagement or engagement, but that's just not the case. So when thinking of creating experiences, and this isn't about the 7 levels. This isn't an entire, we're giving away the book, as we said. I can go on for 2 hours about this. So I have Robert sometimes, again, as we've been friends for so long, looking at me being like, okay, enough about the levels. But something to note is that before you can connect at that 7th level, you have to start with what you stand for and what you believe in. That's your 7th level statement. And as you're designing experiences, as you're bringing people, because people have realized how valuable their time and energy is, not just their money as a resource. And so as you're bringing individuals back in IRL, in real life, and you're asking them to commit to something, you're asking them to trust you, you're asking them to participate in something with their time and energy, know what you stand for and believe in, lead with that, and identify others that align with those values. So I'll stop there, and I love all these examples, and I will pass it on to Robert before I go for 2 million hours.
No, I think that's really great. And I think the thing that's really interesting for most of these, that I'm seeing being added here, is that you can probably remember the exact moment or a collective moment that really made you feel that way. So for, like John said, Design Within Reach, like maybe you had someone who was in the store, super helpful. You sort of explained a problem, they helped you solve it. Same if it was Olive Garden, like maybe you went there for a birthday. And I think that really looking at that and like how to have those connections with your audience in terms of, sort of thinking through it as like, I want, if you kind of put, we have a friend named Simon Sinek who came and spoke at one of our Catalyst Weeks. And, he really says the start with why is like, why are you planning this event? Like before you spend all this money, why are you spending this money? Why are you trying to do it? Like, and what are the outcomes? Like, what are those outcomes that you want? And, ideally at the end, we should all be thinking with the frame of mind that like, I would like for someone to have put my event or my company on this list when asked, did someone see you? Did they understand you? Did they make you feel wanted? Did they make you feel? And if you can't really answer those questions, I sometimes we have challenged some of our clients in the past that thought just because they had money in their, event and marketing budget that they needed to do these events, to say, let's find another way and wait till you're ready to really put on an event like this. Like, I don't think that you're really too ready. Some brands aren't even ready to explain, especially younger brands aren't even really ready to explain themselves of like how they want to be to be seen. So I would definitely say that. So, that goes back a little bit too to identifying your audience is, that really starting with why, really realizing that engagement's not binary, that it's not just someone is engaged or unengaged, that there's a lot of levels that kind of come in between. So, really making sure to identify who those people are. A lot of times with our clients, we will say like, let's make sort of an A list and a B list, making sure to try to get as many of sort of those A list people there as possible, those people that are super engaged with your brand. Also making sure that you segment your audience. Sometimes we suggest splitting things into smaller events because, and this goes back to what Amanda was talking about with the levels, is that you don't want to talk to a new customer the same way you would talk to a customer who, I'm looking here at some of these others that are on here for the New York Botanical Garden in JC. Like, you wouldn't want to say to them, come experience the New York Botanical Garden for the first time. And you're like, wait, I've been, volunteering for you for 25 years and you've sent me an invitation to come experience it for the first time. Did you not value my last 25 years here? And sometimes even within the same event, you can create multiple invitations for how to speak to those target audience. It doesn't have to be this like one sort of blanket email or one sort of communication that goes to everyone. So really getting granular with those things can be really helpful. And that works on social media as well. So, one of the things for social is it's sort of like this necessary evil, but clear messaging, it sounds so simple, but there's a lot of times we were working with one client who, came to us. They weren't having great results with their registration for their event. And they were like, how can you help us with this? Thinking that we were really only going to help them with the production side. And we went through and we did an audit and we were like, we're on your landing page and there's so many CTAs, so many call to actions, like register here, sign up for our newsletter, buy a ticket here, become a friend of the Botanical Garden here. Like, your registration page for an event should only have one CTA, and that should be to buy a ticket or register for the event. You have the rest of your website to have all these other things that you want people to do. But for that particular thing, same thing on social media. When you're talking about a social media campaign, making sure that those are like very clear, very concise, and that people understand the message. And then, I think the next thing that this is something that I take to heart a lot is really talking about events that are accessible, safe, and welcoming. So, one of the things, and it's a bit of a difficult one to talk about, but we did the groundbreaking ceremony for the Raiders out in Las Vegas when they were moving their team from Oakland to Las Vegas. And it was the first public event that was held after the shootings that occurred in Vegas at the concert. And it was just, we went back and forth. Do we cancel this event? Do we continue with it? We were with the CMO and the owners of the Raiders and the management team. And, we were really all going back and forth on what do we do? How do we do this? And we really realized that the community that exists in Vegas, people sometimes think that Vegas is just casinos and the Strip. Millions of people live there. We're really needing community. And so we really used this event to bring people together. We, honored first responders. We had a light that showed up in the sky where the stadium is now for each person who lost their life in that moment. And it was such a time of healing. But we had to do so much above and beyond before the event to make sure that the attendees felt like it was a safe place, that it was a place to come. We visibly, some of the queues were even putting extra patrol cars for the weeks leading up to the event on the site, letting people know that there was going to be secure valet parking, letting people know that they could be dropped off if they wanted. We had extra security at the front, but really just like a welcoming atmosphere. We had people from the Raiders staff that were greeting people, hugging people as they were walking in. And it really, people felt like when they arrived to this venue that we created literally in the middle of a parking lot or a dirt field, that they felt like they could be a part of that event. So, really making sure that, that safety really can be a concern, but also a space where people feel like they know what they're showing up to. So, one of the things that, I say is that adults in groups of 4 or more have to be told what to do. And I used to work with the JP Morgan operating committee and would do tons of stuff with all of the C-level execs from JP Morgan. And we would be, in Bermuda, or we'd be anywhere in the world. And they would literally look at you like, where am I supposed to go? Can I go to the bathroom? Like, can I do this? Can I do that? And people really like to be told what to do. And Amanda, actually broke down my wedding into levels. And selfishly, I got married 2 years ago. And selfishly, I didn't want people to be asking me all weekend, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to wear? So I had a website. I had a very clear, invitation that went out to everyone. And then when everyone arrived, I had this trifold, piece of paper that said, this is where you need to be. This is who you contact if you have a question about this. This is what you're supposed to wear. Don't be late. Here's what's going to be served, that sort of thing. And so really laying out clear and concise, the most granular things that you can convey to the people that are attending your events. I promise it'll help you in the end. And if you're getting right before an event, you're getting tons of questions, people are emailing you, people are texting you, that's because you didn't set them up for success as a planner. And so I always say, the more information, the better. Sending the weather report a few days ahead of time. Are you going to be able to provide umbrellas if there's going to be rain? Saying, please bring a poncho if it's going to be an outdoor event. All of these types of things, letting people know it will continue on if it's raining. Some people don't think to add that in there. And then, you're getting 100 messages asking, is the event still on? So just as much as you can let people know. And then also, like, how do you want people to feel when they arrive? So if people walk into like a cold room and no one else is there and no one is there from your organization to go over and greet them, that's not the way that's how people will remember the rest of the event. Just like Jen was welcoming everyone. She had the soft music playing when everyone arrived. Everyone felt like it was like a very warm and welcoming atmosphere. That you need to make sure to translate to your live in-person event. And I think that for us, so often, that sort of gets left off. We did an event for MasterCard one time where we wanted people to not really know what was coming. So we put them all into a dark room with like very low lighting. And we wanted it to be sort of this sensory experience. People are constantly looking for visual cues. Amanda and I are really big on like closing your eyes, a dark space, like doing things like with audio. So we started it off like that and turned on the lights 8 minutes later and everyone had tears running down their face. And that was the sort of type of event that we wanted and the space that we wanted to create. So really deciding ahead of time, what is that space? How do you want people to feel? And putting yourself in those shoes. If it's an event where people are able to bring a +1 or a spouse or their kids, they can sort of distract themselves with that. If it's a conference and people are there on their own, sort of one representative for their company, and they walk in by themselves, for some people that could be like their worst nightmare. So like, how do we make sure that the social butterfly and the person who, might be a little bit more nervous is sort of the needs of both of them are met. And I know Amanda's busting at the seams to add to this.
Again, I could talk about these levels until I'm blue in the face, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone with too much academic information and insights, but Robert has just naturally been using the levels intuitively in experience design for as long as he's been designing experiences, probably since he was a child. And I think that we all actually use these levels without knowing that they exist. So I do just want to touch upon them briefly. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to talk about some of the ones that Robert just mentioned, because the reason why I really like the levels is, again, intuitively, we know there shouldn't be confusing messaging. But what does that actually mean? And intuitively, we know we should have an intention with this experience and communicate that intention and use that intention to then make the decisions that we're trying to design for these individuals. How do we want to make them feel? How do we want to make them, how do we want them to leave? What do we want them leaving thinking about? What do we want them leaving feeling? What do we want them leaving to do? And so that is, again, starting with that 7th level statement, starting with your intention. For the Raiders, it was about showing up not just as look at us. It was like, we're here for you. And in a lot of ways, also with MasterCard, it was creating an experience for their internal customers, for their employees. And it was being able to show them that they were, a safe, trusted space where people can share and feel heard and feel seen. So it's that first question of why are you even doing this, as Robert has said. But then with the levels, there is a level called level 2, which is called unsystematic engagement. It's when you're confused by the messaging. So again, these levels serve as an opportunity for you to make sure that you're almost having a checklist. And we will share the blog in the chat of Robert's wedding, but it's essentially a checklist. Like, am I doing everything that I take so often for granted, that I think that everyone knows to do, and that I even think, okay, I'm going to do these things. Am I doing it in a thoughtful, strategic approach? And as Robert said, we had these catalyst weeks in downtown Vegas with Tony Hsieh. Tony Hsieh put $350 million in revitalizing downtown Las Vegas after Amazon acquired Zappos. And I moved to Vegas. Robert was in Vegas every month. We were designing these experiences. We would bring people like Simon Sinek to come give talks for free to the workshop, free to the public, talks and workshops. And what ended up happening in that experience is people had never really heard of downtown. I don't know if you've been to downtown Vegas, let me know in the chat. I'm super interested. But and also tell me the restaurant you've been at. That's a double question. But people didn't know what downtown Vegas was. They knew us, but the zip line. Yes, that's a Fremont Street experience. That's a unique part of downtown. But we really had to show them up front, not only that they could trust us. Why were we asking of them? Why were we asking them to come? If you don't communicate the why, people will make up their own whys, and you don't want that. Ask their expectations and communicate how we were going to meet or exceed those expectations, or that we could not meet those expectations, and so they should not attend. Be so explicit before they flew across the country in a lot of ways, and came to this experience where they were giving back. And then, to Robert's point as well, communicate to them maybe 12 times before they arrived on what we expected of them. We did it by video. We did it with a landing page. We did it by an email. We did it with a welcome packet. We did it with follow-ups. We did it with an app. We did it with a Facebook group. I'm not exaggerating. People still would get to the airport and say, where am I supposed to go? And so really going above and beyond, especially as people don't even know right now. I go into stores and I'm like, do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? Do I put hand sanitizer? How do I touch? People have so many questions of the unknown. Make it easy for them to trust you. Make it easy for them to understand why you even want them there in the first place and what you're expecting of them, so that they then know if they should even attend in the first place. And it's going to be a lot easier than just thinking everyone fits into this mold that people don't even know what that mold is. That's my 2 cents, Robert.
No, I think it's
like 7 cents.
Yeah. And, another thing that we wanted to talk about was like the brand focused, authentic event planning. So, one of the things for us at Catalyst is when we started this, we wanted to be all about, authenticity. There's so like in a world of, spending your 20s in New York City, there was so much that was like fake and inauthentic, that what we really wanted to do was create an agency that did meaningful work and that where things were authentic. So one of the things that I love to look at as a case study is we worked with the Nature Conservancy, and they had a group of their volunteer leaders. It was called their Volunteer Leadership Summit, and it took place in Washington, D.C. Every year. And basically it was where people would come for a 3-day experience to sort of like, there was a policy making day where everyone went up to the Hill and talked to their congressional members. There was dinners, there was awards. It was just sort of this like, big thing where the top volunteers, and when I say volunteers, these are appointed positions within each state, but these folks would come. And when they first came to us, it was just like this really boring sort of like run of the mill type conference. And we really said like, how do you make sure that when people come into this experience, it feels like the Nature Conservancy? We're at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in a windowless, ballroom on the lower level, in the middle of a city. And we're supposed to be talking about nature. Like, how do we, so we went as far as like, we brought in like, tons of plants, making sure that, and these people, a lot of them are what we call aging baby boomers. So they had a little bit of extra time on their hands and were super, super particular, but we literally went through to like, make sure the plants that we were renting to be in the space weren't considered invasive species. That was sort of like going against the work that Nature Conservancy did. So like no ivy, no certain types of ferns, no certain types of other things. We also like brought in, people can be super sensitive to smell. So we took out all the smells. So we literally like rented air purification systems systems because there had been a wedding in the, in that same ballroom a few days before we did our load in. So we, brought in air purifiers to like suck out all those food smells so that people were, really able to be in nature. We piped in bird sounds like, during the transitions. And so really looking at like, who is your audience? What are the things that they will appreciate? And then how do you make sure that they feel connected? So that like, I wanted someone to be very engaged in the programming, not like, well, where did they get these plants? Why did they use ivy when that's an invasive species? So there's also times as a successful, event planner that you also have to look at the things that people don't know that they might see. So one time we were setting up for Life is Beautiful and we were walking around and we had our tech team with us and I was like, these wires need to be taped down and these wires need to be taped down. And like all of these things needed to be done. And most people may not have ever noticed them, but if you were sitting there trying to watch and there was this wire dangling and the AC came on, and if you're a little OCD like me and you saw that wire swinging, you might not be able to think about anything else that was happening on stage. So we really try to look at like some of those things that are to make things way more authentic, is to sort of take away the distractions that might be a pet peeve to someone else that's there.
You got at the level. I got him. So, and also one of our team members actually said, you don't even realize that you're breathing air until it's polluted. So like, you're like, oh yeah. So when something is out of place, you just essentially feel it. And so confused by the messaging is not just I'm confused about the experience, it's confused because it doesn't make sense to you. So for those individuals, if they were at an experience that has no windows and they're not immersed in nature and it's not connected to what the Nature Conservancy stands for, that's confusing, which is keeping them at a lower level of engagement. But Robert just touched upon another level of engagement, which is level 3, frustrated engagement. When you want to engage with something, but you're distracted. And as I said, so often we're using these levels without realizing. Robert is not thinking through the levels. He's just talking, and I'm then thinking through the levels of being like, yeah. So with 3, it's really important. You really need to think through what are the distractions. Sometimes thinking of what could go wrong allows for you to determine what could be right versus just jumping to the right. And so when you think through what are all of the things that could get in the way of success, of connecting with our customer. And a lot of the times it's also, if you have programming on the stage, Robert came up with this example, and there's waiters and waitresses coming up to the table and asking even to pour water, and it's the clinking of the glasses and the ice. That's a distraction from when we're trying to maybe raise money and tell a really, really vulnerable story about why your organization exists. So it's making sure that you're communicating clearly, 100%, that your brand aesthetic and the experience itself isn't confusing based on what you stand for and what you believe in and why these individuals are there. And then you're limiting the distractions that keep them from the intention of why they're there in the first place. So Robert, I just had to add the level because you know me.
No worries. So I know we're throwing a lot at you all. We've got just a couple more minutes and a couple other things that we want to talk about. And then we want to make sure that we leave some time in the end for Q&A and any types of interactions that we may want to have. But, another thing that I think is super important is there is this huge amount of pressure in the events world to do things differently and, to like come up with like the next photo booth or like serve the next type of menu or like have the most wild cuisine or whatever. And I really, like in my experience, I steer away from a lot of that stuff. A lot of times being the first to something is not always the best. If you haven't been able to test it, if you haven't been able to like sort of see how people react to it, my thought is always just do it better. So like look at what other people are doing in the industry and do it better, do it smarter, do it on a smaller budget, but like with more impact, do it where people are more engaged. And if you sort of try to think through that lens, because as planners, as people who have attended events, we are always sort of like striving for like this sort of thing, what's next. So, a lot of times Clubhouse, I don't know if anyone is on Clubhouse, but, I think that, a lot of times for us, we just hop on Clubhouse and like listen to what other people are doing. Like we do a lot of stuff where we're, reading blogs, where we're looking at, people who we follow and other industries, our even our vendors, like what are they coming up with? Why don't we let them be the ones to test it? And then we will be the ones to sort of like say, once you have a strong case study or someone else has done it and it works, then let us use it. Because there's nothing worse than, going back to the frustrated engagement piece, is like, there's nothing worse than like coming up with this really cool new idea, and then, on execution day, one little thing not working and it failing. I sort of look back, at, Google had sort of put all their eggs in one basket at CES a few years ago. And there was this huge flood at their particular portion of, the CES booth. And like, obviously it was CES, Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, all about tech, all about electronics. And basically they sent everyone home. Whereas I would have seen that as like a huge opportunity that, we're going to get the insurance money, for our booth being ruined. We have all of our team here. We've got all these things that are already happening. We're Google. We basically have unlimited funds. Why didn't each of the reps and the staff that was there go take a few different people to lunch or to dinner, or create some other meals, or, do some, there was just such an opportunity there for such an iconic brand to do something different. And instead of that, they just sent all of their team home because they said our booth has been flooded. So, really looking and having like a bit of a backup plan in some of those situations to say, like, how can we do this different? Like, this didn't go exactly how I wanted. And I also think that, in events is sort of admitting when things go wrong and sort of apologizing. I think that there has been such a huge tolerance now, especially in these last couple of months and the last year and a half, whether it's with tech, whether it's with, how we're going to do things in person and digitally, but really just like giving everyone a little bit of grace. We've all got dogs barking or kids crying or, whatever, internet's going out or whatever it may be. But sort of like, I always tell anyone who helps us with events is like, if you don't know the answer to a question, don't make it up. Say, I'm sorry, I don't know that, but let me find out. And if we sort of all handled all of our events with that sort of like same compassion and empathy to just say, hey, our tech isn't working, but like, we're going to try this instead. Or, sort of like saying, does anyone have a suggestion of what we should do? Because our PowerPoint, and you never know, there may be another planner there who's like done something and like is willing to offer that advice. So I think really looking and sort of just like being authentic. If you're authentic from start to finish, it'll be such a different experience, and people will feel that authenticity there rather than trying to be something that you're not, or put on an event or do something that you're not. I think is really sort of key. So Amanda, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add on to there, apply it to a level before we get.
I'm not going to apply it to a level, but I'll be brief just so we have some time for questions. But I will just say with the authenticity, it's also, I guess I will apply it to a level, right? Like starting with your 7th level statement, what you stand for and you believe in, looking at moments in time that you can respond to based on that value and belief. And really, again, being nimble and resourceful and thinking on your feet. So going back to CES, at one point during CES, it was announced that it was an all-white male panel for pretty much every stage. And Sonos decided, they had a very strong female CMO leader. They decided to create an experience with us that we produced around listening better. And, for those who aren't familiar with Sonos, it's a listening tool. It's a musician. It helps you amplify sound throughout your homes and throughout your spaces. And they and we curated an all-female panel over an entire day with multiple topics to be able to create this experience in response to, again, what was happening in time and from a cultural perspective. That being said, they had a female leader in an executive position. That's what authenticity looks like. If they had not, and they had then designed this experience, and then someone were to go to their website and see that their entire executive team were also white males, it would be difficult to be able to make the case why that made sense for them to be able to show up in that very specific way. So I think going back to that authenticity piece, it's really starting with, what do I stand for? What do I believe in? But then using that as the North Star to guide all of the decisions that you're making across the board with the aesthetic, the experience, the communication, the limiting of the distractions. What does success look like for you? Not just for your own self, but what does success look like for you as you're impacting and inspiring your customer in some way? So not too much about the levels.
No, that's great. Because, really now between Yelp and Instagram and everyone is a person of, can be a person of influence now. So, depending on how you respond to someone, or, people can easily do the background check on, check someone's Twitter from years ago, as we know happens. They can, really look into the brand, what donations they've given, that sort of thing. So really making sure that you're authentic and doing an event, like not whitewashing an event to be, what's popular or what's cool or whatever right now, or what movement is happening at that time, but really making sure that, as cheesy it is to say, is sort of like, walking the walk and talking the talk. It really does have to go hand in hand now. So I do want to make sure that we have some time for questions. We've got about 13 minutes left. So we can, Amanda and I would love if you felt comfortable coming on video and, asking your question. If not, feel free to type it into the chat and we'll read it out loud and sort of decide who's the best to reply to that. But, feel free to ask us any questions that you have, obviously about events, about engagement, about the 7th level, past experience. If you're working on an event and you have a question, I'll either try to answer it or I'll make it up, or
say you don't know.
Or say we
don't know. Else has an idea. And Robert, did we want to add a question for the chat while we're kind of waiting for the questions around? Maybe for the audience, just to see, because we'd love to hear a bit from you. So, obviously we kind of talked a bit about the 7th level and the experiences that you've had with brands, but we'd also love if you could just think through, you don't have to close your eyes. I normally do like collective breaths when we first arrive, just so that everyone can kind of fully be here. But we didn't get to do that. So just just take a breath. And then Robert, do you want to put in the chat, or should we just kind of say the question out loud for everyone to answer around their most memorable experience? What do you prefer to do?
Yeah. I think it's probably easiest to put into the chat, but if anyone has a super memorable experience in 60 seconds or less that they sort of want to share, I think that it's, I think it's really great to hear if there was a certain time or a concert or a festival or an event for a brand. I think that it would be, really awesome to hear what made that your favorite event and what that event was. And I see that we have over 60 people in here, so hopefully we'll get at least 15 or 20 replies, because it is always great to see like what brands are doing. Sort of that's the part of us being here, is sort of like learning, sort of like what worked. I think one of the and I don't want to make it about us, but while people are typing in, one of the things that was one of my favorite events that we did was we worked with this clean beauty brand called Biossance. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of them. They're sold in Sephora. And basically they wanted to go to Canada. They were launching their product in Canada, and they wanted us to kind of help figure out how that worked. So we started this clean beauty bus in New York, where we gave away tons of product, and people got to come in and learn about sort of like all the, toxins and the, over 300 ingredients that are in a lot of our skincare products that are banned by the EU. And sort of we created this whole display, gave away product, and then the bus traveled into Canada, and we went to Toronto and did a few of those same events there. And just like really getting to like interact with, the people that were there and all that stuff, that for us was really awesome. So it looks like we have a raised hand.
Hi, is it okay to unmute myself to ask my question?
Yes, of course.
Yes,
hello,
thank you.
Sorry, I'm in a meeting, but...
Oh.
Go for it.
Okay, I'll go. So my question was, if you have advice around what to do when you have a group of people coming to an event, virtual or in person, that have very different levels of knowledge and or expertise, and how do you cater for both people who are new and or who are part of like this old guard?
Yeah, so I would say if it's in person, I think we are huge fans of breakouts. So sort of like as people arrive, sort of like you sort of want everyone to start on a collective same note, but then sort of having breakouts to sort of solve problems. So you could put, these people into one room if it's sort of here, and they're here to learn about, this sort of thing, the foundation sort of A, B, and C. But then these people have been here for a while, so let's let them learn, but then let everyone come back and sort of share and sort of get to experience what those, because believe it or not, the sort of people who've been there before will probably learn more from the questions and the problems of the new people than they will just by thinking that they sort of knew everything. Is there a specific industry that you work in or a specific sort of thing that you were sort of thinking about for this?
I work at B Lab US Canada. So I work with a community of B corporations, and just oftentimes we have some people who are like within their company new to what the B Corp community is. And then there's other people who've been around for longer than me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one way to do that too is like if you're having a multi-day conference, is asking those newbies to come in like a night early and like doing a dinner so that sort of everyone arrives to sort of the same level when they get to there. So sort of having this sort of, it sort of raises the level, I would say, so that everyone's sort of on common ground when they arrive.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is this is the unsystematic engagement piece. Like don't assume that they know anything in terms of like if there's an abbreviation or if there's a term or if there's, especially as people get there and they're going to be using specific terms and words, and especially the ones that have been there for years, break it down and be like, okay, let's take a minute. This is a common term that we use often. Let's talk about what this may mean, because not everyone knows this, because you don't want people to have to speak up and be uncomfortable and be like, I don't know what's going on. You want to speak up for them and give them the opportunity to kind of bring them up with you. And you could also even do that where if you sent materials like these are the 5 things to know, like for the beginners, versus this is like the educator in me, versus those who have been there for years doing a different handout or a sheet being like, here are the things you might not know, even though you've been here for 20, 30 years, however long B Corp has been around. So it's like unique, personalized communication to each group beforehand, as Robert said, but also during. You're including everyone into the conversation and the narrative, and then building off of that with each other. You also could pair them up too. You could say, hey, for those who have been here, why don't you, let's have a beginner that you guys can connect with and do a happy hour, or Zoom has breakouts. I could talk about this for a long time, but I know there's other questions, but you could do a breakout where it is, maybe it's a beginner or 2 beginners and 1 individual, and then they can just have a conversation about why are they there? Give them priming questions like, why did they want to be a B Corp? What was inspiring to them? Like just to open it up and then have it be a Q&A.
Great.
And Robert, we did have a question in the chat, and then there are a few more. But one question said, can you provide the best tips on how to plan an aesthetically pleasing fashion event on a budget?
Yes. So we've done some stuff in the past at like Fashion Week. I worked with IMG for quite a few years. One of the things that I highly recommend is picking your venue based on the items that they already have. So a lot of times, for example, people will think that like having a wedding in their backyard is like going to be way less expensive than having it at a restaurant or a venue. Well, when you have to bring in, sound, lighting, glasses, ice, plates, cups, all of those rentals can be super, super expensive. So I say going to a venue that sort of already fits the vibe or the look that you're going for, right there can like cut down a huge piece of your budget. Another thing that we're huge fans of is instead of flowers, we a lot of times do plant rentals. So wherever you are, like it will never go out of style as sort of that whole like super luscious green, atmosphere, or sort of quite the opposite is just going like super stark white. So there's, in most places, or all black, you can rent drape for, not a whole lot of money, either white or gray or black drape to sort of create the space that you want. If you're, sometimes even like one of the most fun fashion shows I went to was like in a gymnasium on the Lower East Side of New York City. And it was like everyone sat in the bleachers. I think they gave a donation to the school, and it was sort of like this sort of really kind of cool place to have an event that was totally unexpected. And then all the focus was actually on the clothes because you were in this old gym and like nothing else really worked. So, but then on the flip side, I've been on the board of a charity called Many Hopes, and we've helped them with their galas for a while. We picked this place in the Lower East Side of Manhattan called Angel Orenstance Foundation. And it's an old Jewish synagogue that doesn't need a lot, just a couple of uplights, but we've really been using a lot of balloons lately. So we got these huge 36-inch balloons that were red because that's the charity's color, and we floated them up high in the ceiling. And there was really no other decor except for those big balloons and a little bit of lighting. And it really, really, really made such a huge impact in that space. So definitely just like getting a little bit more creative, but balloons, foliage, and picking the right venue can really a lot of times help keep costs down.
4 minutes and a few questions. So maybe we just, I did see the one around a little bit up, but I'm just going to kind of go on what I see right now. So how do you do hybrid events, virtual on site, which seems to be the MO going forward? So it's not double the work. Start there, maybe do a minute, Robert, and then I could always add on.
Yeah. So, a lot of times with our clients, our events, we already have sort of like an AV component to it. So just asking them to set up a camera, pipe what's going through there to already just have it as a live stream is really the easiest way to go. Zoom has got so many features now that, sort of make hosting a web event much easier. There are a lot of other platforms that are great for this. I personally, and I shouldn't say this as a planner, I really am not a huge fan of digital events. I find them like super impersonal. We've had a few that have been successful that have been smaller, but sometimes when you get into the thousands of participants, it's just really hard. People put it on in the background and just kind of let it go. But through Zoom and working with your AV vendor to like find a low cost solution, what ends up happening is a lot of times is that you have this sort of like, the event's going on and there's just sort of this camera. I think is making sure that you have someone who's sort of handling what's going on and asking questions, a moderator of sorts, reacting to what people online are doing so that they don't feel like they're just a camera in the back. Another thing is when it comes to digital events, if you're in-person events, if you're giving a gift bag away, the number one way that we have seen people feel a connection to the people that are also online is sending them something ahead of time. So whether everyone is drinking out of the same coffee mug, everyone is wearing the same hat, everyone has the same virtual background. So if at your event you're giving away some sort of swag, send it to those people ahead of time who aren't going to be at the event, and it will really make them feel like they're there. I think, to sort of have that little piece of continuity that runs for both digital and the in-person people.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe I could just try to answer these next questions in 30 seconds, which are huge questions. But I think also be selective with what you're using for digital, and it's not everything is digital or not. Maybe it's the larger sessions. We do have 1 minute, Becca. I think your question is a little, just because I don't want to rush it. It's a very important question. Maybe message us on LinkedIn. Everyone can add us on LinkedIn. We're happy to continue this conversation. I do think, Michael, just the question around with large groups that involve discussion, debate on controversial topics, how can you make sure that people don't get unruly or out of control? I just want to answer that very briefly and then we'll close. I think it's around forming agreement before people even get there to make sure, again, the expectations are aligned. So I use Burning Man as an example. I'm not a big Burning Man person, but Burning Man has these essential like rules or laws or principles that everyone has to agree upon in order to attend Burning Man. I think there has to be something there where you're actually getting people to, whether it's sign or check, or it could just be something very simple and it's beautifully designed. It's like, this is what we expect of you if you're participating. So before they even arrive, and then it's reaffirmed in the space. And they know what it looks like in terms of behaviors. And so I think positively reinforcing is a huge opportunity. I see other questions, but I think, Jen, we might be finished. So would love to figure out how to close. And any other questions, please message us. I get so sad.
You both clearly have so much wisdom and we have tons of questions. One of the things I'd love to suggest is that if you do have questions for Amanda and Robert, we're going to save the chat. We'll figure out a way to get some of these answers back to you for sure. And before we do sign off, this has been such an informative session. Amanda, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about your book, right? And a giveaway for folks.
Yes, definitely not upcoming. I wrote this when I was pregnant, and now my baby's almost 2, but we would love to give this away. to 10 people. You could follow us on Instagram, and then you're going to DM your email address to us. And we're just going to choose 10 winners. And this is really not only around your experience design, but how you can meaningfully connect with the employees that you work with, your external customers through a series of, whether it's a marketing campaign, a digital experience, or a physical event. It's all in the book. So we hope that you enjoy it. And please, again, message us, connect with us. Like, we are happy to continue to support you on this journey and help you design experiences that matter and change people's perspectives.
Yes, thank you so much to the Be Social team and Jen and all of you. What an awesome community that you all have here. So thank you for letting us be a part of that. And definitely, I put Amanda and I's email addresses in here too, but also you can just message us through our Instagram. And please, we want to get out as many books as possible. So send us those email addresses and we'll pick 10 winners.